Hey everybody, welcome back to the Sanctum. Now, although Halloween is far behind us, I've been watching a lot of vampire movies lately, and it's never really not Halloween here in the Sanctum. And watching all those vampire movies inspired me to dig out some of my cool vampire custom figures, especially ones based on vampires from some cool 1970s films. And so over the next few episodes, we're going to focus in on some of those vampires and the films and comics or movies or books that inspired them. And that is why we're going to be entitling these episodes Funky Fangs and Disco Dracs. Now, there are two reasons I was inspired to do this episode. One is I received some really cool customs from the good people at BrentzDolz and my friend Brent Sorensen. And the other is, as the doctors want to do, I was on the internet poking around, and I saw an article that it was the anniversary of the airing of Tobe Hooper's television movie, Salem's Lot. The Salem's Lot film aired on November 17th, 1979, and then a week later on November 24th, 1979, which I found really interesting because in my head I always pictured that they aired back-to-back over 2 nights, like most miniseries did. I didn't know that they would air one portion of the series one week and then you had to wait an entire week to see the remainder of the story. Which I guess is kind of interesting in a way, but in our days now of streaming and binge culture, it must have been insane back then to have to wait an entire week to see the continuation of this story. And as a kid, I was well aware of the Salem's Lot film. I didn't know who Stephen King was at that time in 1979, I don't think, and I hadn't read any of his novels at that time yet. But I do remember seeing the film and wanting to stay up to see it, and my mother was like, no way, you're not watching this. And somehow or another, I snuck in. She had a TV in her room, and she had fallen asleep, and I snuck in to sort of catch a bit of it. She had left the TV on. And of course, the part I saw is one of the most memorable scenes in the movie, and the one that affected most people. And that is where the Glick boy is floating outside Mark Petrie's window, scratching at the window panes and asking to be let in. It's a terrifying scene, and it still holds up to this day. Now, that was pretty much the only portion of the film I caught. I don't recall whether my mother woke up and told me to get the hell out of there, or I panicked and ran, whatever it was. I might have been terrified as well. And in my head, I always saw that Glick boy floating outside my window. I couldn't sleep at night thinking about that. And I'm sure lots of you and lots of other children at the time thought the same thing. So years later, I'm into Stephen King, as I said, and I've read Cujo and I've read The Shining, and I see this copy. This is my original copy of Salem's Lot. And I get it at the bookstore. And I'm like, now I can get to find out what that story is about. And look at that cover. I mean, they don't do paperback covers like that anymore. There was a real art to it, wasn't there? That you'd see these paperback covers and just be like, what is this about? And you can see that they're not really touting Stephen King's name on this so much so, because he hasn't been so popular yet. And as a matter of fact, well, it says a novel by Stephen King, author of Cujo and Different Seasons. And, of course, the back of the cover, they've got that iconic picture of Barlow and the Salem's Lot font from the film. So it's still sort of serving as a tie-in to the film, even though this is 4 or 5 years later. Now, before I go on to talking about the novel, I forget, there's one more exposure I had to Salem's Lot. And that is one Saturday afternoon, I'm out with my dad, and he takes me to some drugstore or general store to get he's getting something, and I'm perusing the magazines and the comic books. And it was either an issue of Starlog or Fangoria. I'm going to guess it was Fangoria. And I'm browsing through it, and they have an article on Salem's Lot. And of course, I see the Barlow vampire, which even at my age, I knew was they're doing a takeoff of Nosferatu. But we'll get to that later on. But the picture I see in there is the picture of Ed Flanders impaled on the antlers. And I'm like, what? This is something they showed on TV? You could see that this guy was impaled on antlers. I have to see this movie. How does this happen? Did he fall into a pit? Because the way the picture is, I thought he fell into a pit and fell on the antlers. And it wasn't until years later when I saw the film that I found out what happened. So I read the book and I love it. And I have to see the movie. And of course, this is the days before streaming. I couldn't just get it. But it was the days of VCRs and video rentals. So I go out at one point or another, once we get a VCR, and I'm able to rent Salem's Lot. But the version that I rented is the truncated version. What they did for theatrical release in foreign markets and for showing it on cable is they cut the film down from its roughly 3 hours to just under 2, maybe an hour and a half. So they took out a lot of stuff. And having read the book, of course, I'm furious. I'm like, what? You know, they rolled over all this stuff. They just sort of keep in the Barlow stuff and the monster stuff. So I was really disappointed with it at the time. I mean, I enjoyed Barlow and the effects, but being a fan of the novel, I was disappointed in the film after having such terrifying memories of it as a kid. Now, years later, I get to see the full miniseries uncut, and I enjoy it to a certain degree. It's not bad. Now, to prepare for this episode, I revisited the film and watched it a few weeks ago. And I watched it because I had just received some fantastic custom figures from BrentzDolz. So, without further ado, here he is. The BrentzDolz version of Kurt Barlow, the Master. This is the 8-inch version and the light blue paint variant. Really great looking figure, and what I always like about BrentzDolz is that he puts them in this clamshell packaging. So you can display them mint in package, so to speak, or you can take them out and display them loose. And we're going to take this guy out and get a closer look. So here he is. We've freed him from his plastic prison. And he's a really great looking custom figure. Brent knocked it out of the park again. Get a close-up look here. Now this paint job on this version is done by Richard Gifford. And he did a fantastic job on this. Look at that sculpt too. The sculpt is by Evgeny Mokin. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, and I really apologize if I'm not. But I think it's spelled Evgeny or Evgeny Mokin. And, I mean, this is amazing sculpt work. And look at the eyes there. And the costuming, clothing is done by Martin Cage of Distinctive Dummies. I really like it that they went for making him barefoot with, you know, painted blue feet and yellowed toenails on him, matching his clawed hands. What I really like about this vampire is how primal and bestial he is. He's got a really great look, and it's very different from a lot of the vampires that were still being shown in the 1970s. Now, at the same time that Salem's Lot came out, Frank Langella's Dracula had also been released. And that was really going for the romantic aspect of vampirism, the classical vampire who is very sexual, who is very sexually attractive. There's nothing sexually attractive about this guy here, and he is even more primal and more bestial than Nosferatu. There was also a Nosferatu remake at this time with Klaus Kinski, and in that, the character speaks. In the original silent version of Nosferatu, the character speaks. This version is just a pure evil vampire. It's like vampirism in its purest form. And I really love the way this vampire looks. I mean, even where he went with, look at the fangs there. The two fangs are right in the middle rather than off to the sides, like the incisors, like most vampires have in film and literature. This one's got them right in the middle, which makes him appear very rat-like, or, you know, rodent-like. And what do rats do? They bring disease, they bring plague, and of course rats are a very important part of the Dracula myth. There are rats in Dracula, he controls rats. There are rats in Nosferatu, and it's, you know, we're sort of hitting the metaphor over the head here. You know, the rats come with Dracula, and Dracula brings a plague, and Dracula brings a disease, and it is the same with Barlow. He brings disease and pestilence to Salem's lot.
And I could see that there were thousands of rats with their eyes blazing red, like his, only smaller. And then he held up his hand, and they all stopped. And I thought he seemed to be saying, rats, 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 thousands, millions of them. All...
Now, Distinctive Dummies put out an 8-inch and a 12-inch version of Kurt Barlow quite a few years back. On the back market, those are incredibly expensive to get. They go for very high prices. There was a limited amount of them, and they are Distinctive Dummies, which are high-quality custom figures. And that's what I really love about BrentzDolz, and why I keep touting BrentzDolz, is he makes extremely affordable versions of these hard-to-get customs that you can't find anymore. For example, this, the Kurt Barlow figure. And they're really well-made figures, and they're very reasonably priced. So you can have something similar to that. And on top of that, Martin Cage does a lot of the paint jobs on this, and a lot of the costume work. Martin Cage designed the clothing on these Barlow figures, and he did a paint job on one of the ones we're going to see later on. So you're getting that Distinctive Dummies style as well for a reasonable price that you won't find when you're trying to get these things on the back market. Because on the back market, these goes for hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And they're really hard to get when they first come out because of the limited availability of them. Now, I do have actual Distinctive Dummy figures in my collection, and I love them, and I'll be showcasing them in later episodes, maybe some coming up soon. I unfortunately do not have any of the Barlow figures. I believe he also did a James Mason stalker figure as well, which would be cool to have. But this one is really great, and we've got the card art here as well, which has, again, you've got that great rat-like fangs there. Cool picture of Barlow. Picture of the Glick boy floating outside the window. I mean, that really is the iconic scene from the film. It's the one that everybody remembers who's ever seen the film or even heard about the film. They always talk about that scene. And you've got some great shots of Barlow here on the back, laying in his coffin. A cool studio publicity photo. I like that one a lot. Opening his eyes, and then, of course, that great pose with his hands outstretched. The other thing I really like about this figure is the clothing. And he's got this, there you can see it there, he's got this weird pattern on the front of his tunic. As if, like, is he part of some ancient secret order? I don't know, the clothing makes him even more creepy, right? Like he just came from the old world, wherever he's from, in Romania or Transylvania or somewhere in Eastern Europe, and he's just part of this ancient evil cult that has existed for eons. Kind of Lovecraftian if you think about it. Now, you may have said to yourself, Dr. Durant, did you just say that that was a light blue paint job variant? Well, that would indicate that there's another 8-inch paint job variant. And dear listeners, you'd be right. I present to you the darker blue paint job variant of BrentzDolz Kurt Barlow, or the Master. Now, this one is painted by Martin Cage of Distinctive Dummies. And I have such OCD with collecting that when Brent showed me these, he's like, well, I've got two different paint jobs. I've got this light blue version. Whoops. That's for the blooper reel. Now, when I was ordering these from Brent said I have two paint variants. I've got this light blue variant, and I've got this darker blue variant. And of course, to me, the light blue variant looked a lot like the version I had seen on the posters and in the pictures. But this dark blue variant was very interesting as well. And of course, being an OCD collector, I have to have every variant. Once I find out there's a variant, well, I've got to have that so I can lay claim to who knows who I'm bragging to about this, that I have each variant. But with these, they're very distinct paint jobs, and they're very different. It's not like, oh, one has a blue belt and the other one has a dark blue belt. These are different, and they are cool variations. Martin Cage did the paint job on this, as I stated, and he's directly from Distinctive Dummies. That's his company. And here we get a look at Martin's paint job. Now, one of the things I noticed when I was looking at these is the way his ear is shaped. And at first I thought the figure was broken, that a chunk of his ear had come off. But it's just this cool bat-like shape for his ear, which I really like that they did. And look at those eyes. A little bit of a different costume on him. Oh, let's not forget his hands here. I like them both. I have to have them both. They're very different looking. Even the sculpts look a little bit different the way they painted them. I know it's the same sculpt, but you can see how two different artists made two very distinctive versions of Barlow, and they're both great. Richard Gifford did the light blue version. Martin Cage did the darker blue version. Clothing was by Martin Cage on both, but even he made different clothing for each one. You can see the darker version has more of this dark gold trim around the cape to match his eyes and his claws. And the other version, the light blue version, has sort of that lighter gold. Now, dear viewers slash listeners slash telepaths, however you're receiving this information from me, you are saying to yourself, Dr. Durant, you said that Martin Cage, Distinctive Dummies, had an 8-inch version of Barlow and a 12 or 14-inch version? Well, did BrentzDolz do the same? And I would say to you, hell yeah, he did. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, young and old everywhere. Here he is, the 14-inch version of Mr. Barlow by BrentzDolz. I mean, I had to have this. Now, this is a light blue paint variant, and it came in a very awesome box, a very cool box. Nice artwork there. Cellophane thing. Oh, Mr. Barlow, Salem's Lot. And it had this great little card tag in there with the box art on there. And it is number 2 of 29. BrentzDolz. Paintwork by Richard Gifford. Box design by Greg Jensen. Clothing by Martin Cage. And sculpt by Evgeny Mokin. Again, I apologize if I mispronounced that. But let's take a look at this fella here. Really nice sculpt. Really hefty. I think what he used for the body is the 14-inch Frankenstein body from the new Mego. But it's a great body. And look at that head. His bloodshot eyes, his feral fangs, his bat-like ears. Or maybe his ears got clipped off in some injury years ago. Because that ear doesn't have a clip to it, does it? And that mysterious symbol of what ancient order Mr. Barlow is from. And these great claws. That's what I love about it too, is sometimes when people make custom figures, they might just do a 3D sculpt of a head or change up the head, and then you've just got sort of the original hands of whatever type body they're putting the head on. They might just paint the hands blue. Brent goes all out and he puts all new hands on the figure so that it appears to be the character that it is. There they are, the Barlow boys and all their variations. 14-inch, 8-inch light blue variant, 8-inch darker blue variant. Buy them all if you can, if you dare. Now we come to the point where we discuss how these vampires fit into the 1970s and how they're relevant to the 70s and even today. I honestly find the novel to be close to, and the movie to be closer to Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which is something King has said himself. He had written this during the time of the Watergate hearings, and of course, you know, Salem's Lot was supposed to be a modern Dracula story, a product of the 20th century. And a direct quote from King is he said, you know, it's a book about vampires, but it's also a book about all those silent houses, all those drawn shades, all those people that are no longer what they seem. And that's a recurrent theme throughout most of King's work, is these idyllic small towns and then the evil that is festering just underneath. And what it would take to turn the people, your neighbors, your friends, against each other. How easy it is for moral disintegration to occur, for them to become monsters. And this is really the first book where he explores that theme. He explored it a little bit in Carrie, of course, but Salem's Lot is really where he's delving into that theme of small New England towns and the evil that lies underneath there. And of course, that's a very Lovecraftian theme as well, with an ancient terror. And that's sort of the direction that Hooper kind of takes with it, in that he doesn't go for the Dracula figure. He's not well spoken. And in the novel, the house that the Marston house that they live in is immaculate. It's like a mansion. But in Hooper's version, it's the same type of house that the Saw family lives in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's filthy. You can see water running off the walls. There's mold. There's dead animals hanging on some of the antlers, and it's just disgusting. There's those like chicken feathers floating around. Like I said, it's exactly like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He said, Hooper had said that he really liked this juxtaposition of James Mason, you know, a classically trained actor, immaculately dressed, you know, to the nines with a derby and a three-piece suit, that he was living in this house that was just a filthy wreck, and he was caring for this primal vampire. And of course, once he makes the other vampires, the majority of them live just in the dirt floor of his fruit cellar. Now you've got Hooper doing this anti-Dracula. You've got this primal Dracula who's a creature. He lives in a crappy, decrepit mansion. And also, the other thing that you've got is that all the vampires in this film, I believe this is the first time that we see working class vampires. Ordinary people becoming vampires. Usually they're very drawing room mysteries or aristocratic people in you know, British, you know, in London and things like that. And in Hooper and King's book, you've got regular Joes, you know, the town gravedigger, the garbage man, the local landlady, the town drunk. They're all becoming vampires. So there's this whole theme of fear. Can we trust our friends? Can we trust our neighbors? You know, paranoia. do we know who we are? That's the other thing, right? Do we even know who we are? Because a lot of that, and it's explored more so in the novel than in the film, of course, is people waking up and just not feeling right. And they're like, why do I feel this way? Well, what's happening to me? What am I becoming? And of course, you know, when you live in a small town, and this is the theme that King and Hooper both explore, small towns are like a bubble, right? And when you live in a bubble, it's easy to take people over because they may be aware of the outside world, but they're not actively involved in it. The film is really good. I did enjoy it the second time around. It's got some of the tropes of a made-for-TV movie, of course, but I think that Hooper is a really underrated director. He hasn't really been given his due, and he made a really great little movie here, especially with some of the changes and the tweaks in it. The cast is a who's who of 70s actors. I'd say, if anything, the weakest part of the cast is actually David Soul, who doesn't really have much charisma. He's great on Starsky and Hutch, but he just doesn't have that leading man quality to carry, Salem's Lot. And I know that the script should have been fleshed out more to make his character more interesting. But you've got David Soul as the main character. You've got Bonnie Bedelia, pre John McClane's wife days, as the girlfriend. You've got Lance Kerwin, who's great. I mean, he's playing a monster kid in the film, right? And Lance Kerwin was a character actor, a child character actor that was in so many things. After school specials, he was on episodes of Shazam. He was in so much in the 70s and early 80s. And it's really cool that he is a monster kid too, right? I always thought it was interesting that he sort of believes in this world of make-believe monsters and magic. He's into magic and things like that. And there's a scene in the film where his father comes up to him and he's like, why do you like all this stuff? What is it about this stuff you like? And he's like, I don't know, Dad. I can't explain it. And his father says, well, when are you going to outgrow all this? He's like, I don't know. I guess someday. And what's interesting is the way he outgrows it is he's confronted with actual real evil and real monsters and real vampires. So it's kind of cool that this monster kid now has to face real monsters. You've got James Mason as Richard Stalker. He adds a lot of class to the film, and he was doing a lot of stuff like this back then as well. I mean, he had probably just come off of Frankenstein, the True Story, so he's in a Frankenstein reboot and he's in a Dracula reboot, and he's really great, and he's very creepy in the way he talks to people, and there's so many scary, neat little scenes in the film that make it. Now, the plot itself is Stephen King light as for the relationships between the people, but there's still just enough there to make it interesting. You've got a great scene after the Glick boy dies where you've got Stalker bringing this small wrapped package in like a body bag and laying it on the table in the filthy basement of the Marston house. And of course, in that package is the Glick boy, and he's bringing it, as dinner for his master, Barlow. And you've got another scene where Barlow first fully appears when he breaks into Lance Kerwin's house and confronts the priest. And it's this really strange scene where the house shakes like there's some type of earthquake going on. The window smashes open, and this small little ball of what appears to be, laundry, like a black cloak, is just laying on the floor. And then it grows slowly, 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 and it's Barlow. And it's a really creepy, terrifying scene. And of course, he's just hissing and growling. He can't even produce words, which makes him all the more terrifying. Because you're expecting him to jump up and say something, like a Dracula-type monologue, and he doesn't. He's just a rabid dog. And he kills Lance Kerwin's parents instantly, and of course causes the priest to doubt his faith and have to escape from Salem's Lot. You've got Jeffrey Lewis, awesome character actor. He's got some great scenes. He's got the scene where he's burying the Glick boy and he goes down and opens the coffin and Danny Glick comes out and kills him. You've got Ed Flanders, one of my all-time favorite character actors. He's an amazing actor. He's probably one of the best actors in Salem's Lot. He's the guy that's impaled on the antlers that made me want to see this movie when I looked at that issue of. And by the way, I've done research since I started recording this episode. I found it. It was not Starlog. It was not Fangoria. It was an issue of Cinefantastique. And I found it online and I read the article and I saw the picture. I'm like, that's it. That's the picture I saw. Amazing. And Ed Flanders was also in a lot of great William Peter Blatty films. He's in The Ninth Configuration, and he's also in Exorcist 2. Exorcist 2, I'm sorry. He's in Exorcist 3. Exorcist 2 is another story altogether. He's in Exorcist 3. Died way too young. He committed suicide, but fantastic character actor, and he really is excellent in this movie. We've got Lou Ayres, Planet of the Apes connection. He was in Battle for the Planet of the Apes, as well as All Quiet on the Western Front. You've got George DeZunda, who's one of the characters in town, and he has a great little scene with Fred Willard where he catches Fred Willard cheating with his wife and makes him put a shotgun in his mouth and chases him out into the street. And, of course, Fred Willard is killed by Barlow. You've got Fred Willard, who, in this rare, strange kind of dramatic role, of course. And then you've got Kenneth McMillan as the constable / sheriff. He played, Baron Harkonnen in David Lynch's Dune, and he's in hundreds of things back in the 70s and 80s. And he's really great, but, there he is. He is the representation of, he's the representation of law and order. And when things start really going bad, he takes off. He skips town. He gets the hell out of there. So again, you've got that breakdown of the institutions that are meant to protect us. They can't. In the end, we can only protect ourselves. Even our faith can't protect us because the priest just, he doesn't have the faith to face Barlow, and he leaves town. So our religion can't protect us. Our institutions that are set up by a government can't protect us. In the end, all we have is ourselves. And King said he was really, really disillusioned with society in general when he wrote this book. And he had intended to kill everybody in the book, that everybody was going to die. But he said as he was writing the book, he couldn't kill Ben and the boy because he just grew to like them too much. So he let them survive. And the book does not have a happy ending. They do set the town on fire and they leave. And, King had said he had intended to write a sequel later on down the line, which I'd love to see. He says that it would start with Father Callahan, who did leave town prior to everything, is working in a soup kitchen, and a man comes in, and he's bleeding and dying, and he goes up to Father Callahan, and he says, I know you were the priest from Salem's Lot. And Father Callahan's like, I'm not a priest anymore. And he says, it's not over in the lot. It's not over. And then he just dies. And so I think it was supposed to be Father Callahan is supposed to go back to the lot, and Ben and the boy as well. I don't know if he'll ever do it. He's written hundreds of books since then, and he's a very prolific writer. But he's written a couple of short stories following up on Jerusalem's Lot, which was pretty good. But I'd love to see him return to doing a sequel to Salem's Lot in novel form. And of course, you've got Reggie Nalder, Ambassador Schross, the Andorian ambassador from one of my favorite Star Trek episodes, Journey to Babel. He's in it as Barlow, and he does a fantastic job. And from what I understand, in real life, he was disfigured in a fire or some type of accident, and that's why he was always sort of casting these villainous, monstrous roles. But he looks fantastic in the movie. He does a really great job as Barlow, which is hard to do because he has no dialogue. And Hooper, like I said, King, of course, made a fantastic novel. Now, for all intents and purposes, this is not Hooper's follow-up to Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He did do eaten alive, but I think there was some controversy with that film behind the scenes, and he sort of wound up walking off it, and wasn't a film that he was necessarily proud of per se, I don't think. And originally George Romero was slated to direct Salem's Lot as a theatrical feature, but again, it was such an immense book, they couldn't fit it all into a theatrical feature, which is strange because then they take the miniseries later on down the line and they truncate that and they make it a theatrical feature. But somehow it fell in Hooper's lap. Hooper got it, and he added that Tobe Hooper touch to it. And again, same thing. He was very much like Stephen King. You know, a lot of these guys coming out of the 70s and going into the early 80s were very disillusioned with what was going on in society at the time. Watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That's just a representation of just, that's an American family, right? It's terrifying. And it's the same thing here. As he loved to see that this town was just being destroyed by this ancient primal evil. And I think it's kind of interesting that King was fearing for the future at the time. Hooper might have been as well. And the thing that is destroying the future is not something that is from our present or our future. It's some deep-seated evil from our long, primitive past that has never gone away. And it's here, and it's infecting us. And one by one, we're all getting taken over. Well, loyal viewers and constant listeners, that brings us to the end of another episode of Dr. Durant's Sanctum. I appreciate you all taking the time to sit back and listen to me ramble on about movies and toys and books and whatever strikes my fancy. I really did have a good time sitting back and dissecting this film and novel, as well as showcasing those awesome BrentzDolz figures. And I really do enjoy communicating with you all on YouTube. Just to let you know, we do have a Facebook page as well, and that is posted up in the banner on our channel site. You can communicate with other Dr. Durant's Sanctum fans there. There's a handful. And you can communicate with me. And if you leave comments on the videos, I usually try and communicate with each and every one of you and respond to your comments. I really do enjoy hearing your stories about how these episodes resonated with you, memories you have of these items, of these books, of these films. And I love the stuff that each and every one of you has shared with me. It really makes my day communicating with you all on this. And it is a fun, tiny little community, but I enjoy you all being a part of it. So, keep your eyes peeled for some more 1970s vampire episodes coming up in the near future. If you have any recommendations of any vampires you'd like me to focus on from the 1970s or films, I'd be glad to hear it, and maybe I'll do it. And I'd love to hear your memories on Stephen King, Salem's Lot, the BrentzDolz that I showcased. Did you watch the miniseries when it was on in 1979, or perhaps later in life? Have you read the novel? Did you enjoy it? Love to hear your thoughts on all things Stephen King, Salem's Lot. Whatever strikes your fancy, just come by and shoot the breeze. Like I said, we've got that Facebook page. It's up on the banner, and I'll leave a link to it in the description as well. And I'm going to try and squeeze in a few Christmas episodes if possible before the end of the year, just to get us all in the Christmas mood. Before I leave you, I'll leave you with this quote from Stephen King's short story, One for the Road, where we return to Jerusalem's Lot. After that, for a time, things were better, and then they started again. Whatever you do, don't go up that road to Jerusalem's Lot, especially not after dark. So, until next we meet each other in the sanctum, walk in beauty, my friends.
up a terrific battle, ma'am. But clean living prevailed.